42% patients who are diagnosed with cancer in America today, 42%, become completely financially bankrupt by the second year of their diagnosis, and they are not being cured.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health. And today is particularly important to me, but it's going to be really important to you after you get a chance to follow this podcast. I'm with someone that I have had the absolute privilege of knowing and working with for almost 2 decades, Dr. Azra Raza, the Chan Soon Shung Professor of Medicine at Columbia University Physicians and Surgeons Medical School. And Azra happens to be somebody that I have had nothing but admiration for her brilliance, her courage, and her willingness to challenge the convention in everything we do in medicine, how we treat patients, how we evaluate, how we monitor, how we follow them, and are we doing enough? And that question is something that I think we need to raise over and over again, particularly in cancer. So Azra, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I had the great opportunity to listen to, and many of you, once you follow Azra Raza on our podcast and do a little bit of Google homework, you'll see some of her presentations like TED Talks and so on. You'll find that she has a really refreshing view of what we can do to improve healthcare, not just in cancer, her specialty, but more broadly throughout the treatment and management of chronic diseases, throughout how we approach treating the elderly population. And what I love is that she feels it's our responsibility as physicians and surgeons to actually do more than we do already. So what I want to start off with is your book, The First Cell, was a call to action in a lot of ways. And for me, I saw it as a reinforcement of my concept of root cause analysis is something we do in most major technology fields. We don't do it often enough in healthcare, but you've brought it all down to the fact that one single cell can initiate a process that will take someone to their grave. How do you connect the biology of aging and the biology of a disease like cancer?
Excellent question, Bob, because this is an issue that is at the heart of the whole chronic diseases problem. And cancer is just one of the many chronic diseases that start to appear more and more with age. And so, right from the get go, when I got interested in cancer, I also got interested in aging. What is the relationship between a body that is slowly becoming decrepit and the appearance of disease, especially of chronic nature, which is means that something that is lasting at least longer than a year and is the source of great disability to the individual. And so I started by asking questions about what is happening in the microenvironment of the body that is changing with age, and what kind of stresses it is putting on the cells in living in that environment that they are forced to misbehave.
I love that term. You often refer to the event that turns a cell haywire as a behavior problem. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. So tell the audience a little bit about how you as a young woman decided to devote your career to cancer, but curing cancer, not just managing it, but curing it.
I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, but I was very curious always. And I used to read a lot because I grew up in an environment where there was no television, not much entertainment, and long afternoons of siesta, where kids were left alone and parents were resting. And so I read so much as a teenager and got interested in cancer. And to begin with, I was interested in ants. And if I had grown up in this country or anywhere in the West, I would have become a myrmecologist. Because to me, it was just fascinating what this social societies of ants can do. But then I got interested in developmental biology, just reading about what the human body is all about, and then what goes wrong. And the worst thing that can go wrong is cancer. So I got interested in cancer, Bob. And the two things that fascinated me was reading Virchow's original thing, where he discusses the fact that if we treat the body as a state, then cells are its citizens. And citizens have certain responsibilities and rules to follow. And one essential fundamental rule is that cells need to stay in the organ of origin. A brain cell stays in the brain, lung cell in the lungs, ovarian in the ovaries. They shouldn't wander out. But there is one condition in which they do, cancer. This mobility fascinated me. And then the more I read about cancer, it's almost like from birth, this thing behaves like a foreign species, as if everything around it is an adverse microenvironment which it has to reject. And so, and it can live forever because all it does is divide into two and then start preparing to divide into two. It serves no useful function. Yet, Bob, if you look at cancers, which there are about 200 that have been described, 200 different kinds of cancers, they all have a convergent evolution to a point where every cancer which is malignant is going to share two properties. The first is that this cell can ignore all growth inhibitory signals around it and can continue to grow no matter what is trying to stop it. That's number one. All cancers share it. And the second is it doesn't mature. It remains immature and therefore performs no useful function. These two things are common to every cancer. And so I realized at a young age, actually, that I want to dedicate my life to studying this strange phenomenon that within our body we are giving birth to an immortal species and it's mobile. It's walking around in the body. Breast cancer cells ending up in the brain, in the bone. I mean, it's completely, this rejects all the normal rules in the body.
You know, it was that description that first got me thinking, if you look at it as a foreign species, literally, um, you have to say, well, what is at the root cause? What are your defenses against it? And so that's one of the reasons why we've been so interested, and you and I have collaborated on trying to find an element of the immune system that we can weaponize against the malignancy and do it with a precision and with a potency that makes a difference clinically. So I've been really lucky. Azra and I have been passionate about collaborating around natural killer cells, a topic you've heard me speak about. So let me ask you a couple of questions. From your vantage point as an oncologist and a scientist and as an author, when you think about the natural killer cell, how do you see it in the grand scheme of the immune system?
Yeah. Well, listen, first of all, this whole obsession with genes, DNA has really driven me nuts. Everybody and their grandmother in cancer research only want to study mutations. They find some specific mutation that characterizes a pancreatic cancer versus glioblastoma, brain cancer, and then develop a magic bullet. Well, this thing has failed for 50 years, except in 1 out of 200 cases, which is chronic myeloid leukemia, which is not even a cancer at that stage.
Right.
Except for that, this model hasn't worked. Why are we constantly following that? To me, it has always been very obvious, like to you, that one cell has 1 trillion molecules inside it. 70% of the decision a cell makes are made by its cell membrane, not even the DNA, for God's sake. But no one is studying those kinds of things in a cell. And the other thing is, it's so complicated to try and understand this dynamic interaction between 1 trillion molecules inside a cell that I felt very early on that the best way to deal with it would be let other cells deal with it, who know better, who have all the signaling powers. And so, why not? To me, cell therapy is the absolute must and the wave of the future. So I'll say one more thing, then I'll shut up. My colleague at work is Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee. I adore the boy. He's the best writer science ever saw, but also a great scientist, by the way, and a great physician. You've read his books. He got the Pulitzer Prize for Emperor of All Maladies. He is developing technologies to target the last cell. And we share a lab. I'm targeting the first cell, Sid Mukherjee targeting the last cell. Technically, we should be the opposite of each other, but instead of being viciously competitive, we are synergistically cooperative. Why? Because at some level, I know that the first cell I'm after will need technologies that Sid is developing, and Sid understands that the technologies he's developing will end up having to target the first cell, and it won't work only to try and eliminate the last cell. So, first of all, we agree on cellular therapies that that is the way to go, the best technology. Now, you asked me about natural killer cells. I don't know if these are the best cells or not, but the fact that they are natural and they are the killers, to me, that seems more obvious to for use than any T cell or any other kind of cell.
It's a good point. I mean, for us, we've always tried to break things down to fundamental common denominators. And what struck me about NK cells is first, as part of the innate immune system, which for the audience, that's the kind of the pre-programmed immune system. You're born with it. It's designed to protect you against the most common threats that you're going to face in extra uterine life, postnatal life. But what's really incredible is that the same way that they hunt down, for example, viral infected cells or cancer cells, which express these stress antigens, which you, by the way, speak of, eloquently, that cells put out a red flag.
Yeah.
They put out a red flag and they say there's something abnormal about me. They actually help the immune system find and destroy them. But the fact that that same common denominator is seen on senescent cells has gotten me very interested in the possibility, because you always say, why try and start treatment at the very end stage of
Yeah.
disease? Why not get as early to the origins as possible and eliminate what's going to eventually turn into that untreatable, irreparable abnormal cell? And so right now, again, people say, well, have you changed what your focus is? Is it cancer? Is it immune disease? Is it infectious disease? Is it longevity? My argument is the mechanism's common to all of those things. And the NK cells appear to be a good tool against that fundamental stress ligand mechanism, which is the red flag the cells put out. So I'm hoping that we get to continue to collaborate and do more in that area.
Can
So,
I say one thing here?
please.
When I came to the US, this is back in 1977, I was struck very much by the fact that a lot of people in suburban Buffalo, where I was living at the time, Roswell Park,
Right.
had these pink flamingos in their backyard, front yards. Pink flamingos. I found them such cute creatures. But I thought about these pink flamingos a lot as a result of just fascination by someone from Karachi who had gotten up and come to Buffalo, New York. Flamingos are really white genetically.
Uh-huh.
It's only the ones that eat dry shrimp that
Right.
become pink.
Right.
In other words, there's no genetic thing making them white flamingos or pink flamingos. It's an environment
Right.
that has changed their color completely.
And their phenotype.
Their phenotype is totally dependent on not just the genotype, but also the environment in which they're living. And this, when I thought of that, it immediately clicked in my head. That's exactly what's happening in cancer. That it cannot be just the behavior of the cell itself that's wrong. It's the microenvironment also that is forcing it to behave, or vice versa. It has to be interactive. And by the time we unravel in a stepwise fashion every intracellular signaling molecule and every extracellular pathway, it will be 1,000 years. We don't have that kind of time. So we need to go, and too many people are dying. You see, this is what happened to me, Bob, that I had started with an intellectual fascination for cancer. But once I saw cancer patients in Pakistan, which you cannot imagine, because in 1970s, these would be people coming from far away northwestern frontier provinces, traveling on donkey carts and oxen carts for months to come to the city, Karachi, and be seen. These are skeletal, thin, fragile, older individuals with huge fungating masses of
Yeah.
tumors sprouting out of their limbs and chests, poor women. And there's a very unique smell attached to cancer, which you guys in the West don't even see ever because cancer is treated early.
Right.
You have to see an end stage cancer patient to get used to that smell. And there are dogs that can
Absolutely.
smell
I was
cancer.
going to say
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So I have smelled that cancer, even though my smelling power is 1,000,000 times less than that of a dog, as you well know. But seeing all of that, my curiosity changed to wonder. Curiosity is when you're seeking explanations, but wonder is when you stand in awe because everything you thought you knew has suddenly been overturned on its head. And the suffering of these individuals, the anguish, the pain was so profound that I swore to myself then, as a third year medical student, that I will spend the rest of my life trying to decrease this suffering. And after coming to the US and working in a very deadly form of cancer, acute myeloid leukemia, it was clear to me that in my lifetime this won't be cured. So I have to move to an earlier stage, find cancer before it finds us. The reason for telling you all this is that I became committed to two things very early in my career. One, that the only good news we can give a cancer patient is, hey, we found it early, so we can get rid of it. So
Right.
early detection is best. But how do you find leukemia early? It's all over the place, hundreds of millions of cells circulating in your blood. Well, find people who are at risk of developing leukemia, monitor them, follow them, and once they develop leukemia, now you need to look at what caused that phase transition from one form to another. And that is so essential to all my research. And number two, I decided that I'll try to find people at risk of cancer and study them and follow them. And number two, I'll only study humans. Because with animals, like, you always have to force a cancer on animals. You're not studying spontaneous cancers in any animal. There is not one single model of cancer in vitro that you can tell me is authentic and true to and faithful to what is happening in the human body. There just isn't. And the example I give is the painting by Magritte. This is not a pipe. It's a picture of a perfect picture of a pipe. It looks like one, it's beautiful. But why does he say this is not a pipe? Because you can't pick it up and smoke it. That's why it's not a pipe. So a model can look like the real thing, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so you have always been a wonderful colleague and someone I admire for your clear thinking in this area, going to find cells that can do a lot of the tasks that we don't understand. It's like AI. We don't know what that AI is finding, but it's finding some signature that's unique. And you followed this like 20 plus years ago and made such important, crucial, landmark, seminal discoveries. I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, listen, the truth of the matter is, this is why you and I, as an example of colleagues who have arrived at the same place, despite very, very different career paths, need to force the kind of collaboration and cooperation that you and Sid have, which is it. People would say it's peaceful coexistence. What it is it's innovative collaborative kind of spirit. We really need to get back to that. Now, I got to tell you, I love you for lots of reasons. One of the things I love about you most is you're a poet. You are truly a connoisseur of poetry, and I love listening to you recite some of your favorites. But have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
Of course.
I've got to say, I've seen it about 15 times so far. Absolutely love it. Do you remember the scene where Niels Bohr and Oppenheimer are talking when he's still a young student? And he said that they're talking about music and the fact that Oppenheimer very humbly says he has no talent, and he can't play a single line of music. And Niels Bohr says, doesn't matter if you can write, read, or play the music. Can you hear the music? I would say you've taught me in many ways. We have to hear the poetry in what patients tell us, what our colleagues are doing, and how they interpret their success or failures in research and in taking care of patients. But can you give us for just a minute on how poetry has influenced your life as a scientist and as a physician?
I think that in my life, poetry and medicine are the most intimately connected things. And there are a couple of reasons for it. You don't write poetry because you ate a good meal at a restaurant or you didn't get a parking ticket. You don't write poetry. You write poetry about intense experiences. In fact, all of art is really devoted to somehow representing profound human experiences through the medium of writing, painting, music, whatever you want to take. Poetry to me is particularly interesting because words interest me a lot. And for poets, you have to say in 25 words or less, give a profound message. That means you have to pick and choose and think about every single word. And you can somehow contain a universe, a macrocosm of meaning in a microscopic two lines.
Yeah.
Just like the two strands of DNA can code for 20,000 proteins in the body, just two strands of DNA. And that, so to me, this idea of the microcosm representing the macrocosm. Secondly, as a scientist, you and I have to be obsessed with detail. We cannot just take what is on the surface. You and I are interested in what is behind this surface. And then we can describe things not only as they are, but as they could be, as they should be. And these are the things that our poetry tells us. Give you one example. Every day, literally, in my clinical work, I am dealing with patients who I'm diagnosing with a terminal illness or walking them to their end of their journey. And I see 30 to 40 cancer patients a week. How do you tell someone that they've been diagnosed with cancer? Emily Dickinson tells you how. Listen to these words, and then you'll understand, Bob, why I'm so obsessed with poetry. She says, tell all the truth. Look at the admonition in this first line. You have to tell all the truth. You can't hold anything back. You can't give false hope. You can't start making up delusional things. She starts by that. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies, too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. Like lightning to the children, eased with explanations kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind.
You know, it's a distillation of important feelings that we often, as physicians, are trained to mask and trained to use tactics rather than be sensitive enough to what really we should be communicating with these
Yeah.
patients.
One more thing. Emily Dickinson, just 4 lines. She is so beautifully ironic. This woman was a complete rebellious character. Writing in 1850s, she says, faith is a fine invention. I mean, what an opener. And she grew up in a very religious house. Anyway, faith is a fine invention when gentlemen can see but microscopes are prudent in an emergency.
It's brilliant. I
Brilliant.
love it. I love it. Well, listen, we sit here in awe of how you can distill your professional and sort of personal life into messages that everybody understands. You know, the audience is a mixture of biohackers and wellness enthusiasts and so on. And then we have some folks who really care about the same things you and I care about, which is moving the bar, changing the way we address disease. All I can say is that I hope you're willing to come back and you and I can continue this conversation and hopefully do it on the heels of you and I generating some exciting data with the cell therapies that you and I both believe are kind of intuitively logical in the treatment of disease. So as we're wrapping up, the one thing I've got to ask you is your book, The First Cell, um, is a favorite of many people that are close to me, including my daughter. And what is for people who get a chance to really absorb what your work in that book really is, what's the one thing you want them to take away from it?
Thank you for asking. First of all, we must work together, but that means you have to stop ghosting me. um, about the book, look, I've been taking care of patients, doing research, doing all of this for 30 plus years already. Why did I need to write a book right now? Obviously, there were some extenuating circumstances like the death of my daughter's best friend, my own husband's death, all these personal issues, plus all the experiences with patients. I finally decided to look at the entire cancer paradigm through the prism of human anguish. We need to ask at every step of the way, what is it we are actually doing to patients? Are we getting them 6 months of improvement in survival at the cost of intense physical toxicities and financial toxicities, where 42% patients who are diagnosed with cancer in America today, 42%, become completely financially bankrupt by the second year of their diagnosis and they are not being cured? What kind of insanity is this? What we should be so embarrassed about this. And so, the one message I want people to take home from it is what is in my title and the subtitle: the first cell and the human costs of pursuing cancer to the last.
You know, you have the courage to say these things, and unfortunately, the system has overgrown the common sense of the institutions, the healthcare institutions. And you know, and I know that eking out an additional 2 months of lifespan at the expense of quality is something we talk about a lot, yet it hasn't changed the process of getting drugs approved, getting drugs developed, et cetera. I agree with you completely, and I'm hoping that you can continue to drive and inspire people to start looking at the not only the societal cost, right, but the individual cost of putting people through something when we haven't done our job at giving them a tool that really relieves their problem. And in some cases, I hate the term palliative care because I think it's incorrect. It's not the real description. It's actually humanizing the care that we provide in many ways. And I can tell you that we've abandoned some very useful tools that you and I both believe will at some point transform what we deliver in the treatment of not only cancer but many chronic diseases. And it's one of the reasons why I want to get back with you and talk about this maybe on a more regular basis, because I think your words will help shape some of the future scientists, investors, even practitioners as to how they approach these diseases. So I promise no more ghosting. You and I are going to spend a lot more time doing this. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Having Dr. Azra Raza here is one of the great treats for me personally, and it makes me really happy that we started Piloting Health. So again, I'm Dr. Bob Hariri. I'm very grateful for all of you, and stay tuned for our next episodes. Thank you.